Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some about neuroscience and neuroplasticity of the brain. So, just to let you know, the objectives during this presentation first, to recognize the key components of the brain along with the central nervous system. That way, you have an idea of the actual physical components that we're talking about. Second objective is to explore how trauma affects the brain and gain an understanding of the polyvagal theory. The third one is to examine how neuroception and co-regulation support brain healing in both the students and ourselves. And then 4 is discover methods to promote neuroplasticity for personal growth and student learning. Because oftentimes what happens in the teacher is extremely crucial in what can happen in the students. So, first and foremost, brain structures. There's 3 really important ones that we're going to talk about that are highly affected by trauma. First and foremost, the prefrontal cortex. And just a quick overview, it's responsible for all of your executive functions: thinking, decision making, planning, self control, managing your emotions. So, this is really pretty much the epicenter for your brain. Now, trauma does greatly affect this. Essentially, when your brain is experiencing trauma, it shifts away from the thinking brain, this prefrontal cortex, and all of thought processes go through the amygdala, which is your survival part of your brain. So when it's experiencing trauma, it makes it harder to feel safe, think clearly, or regulate your emotions because your brain just then enters the fight or flight. So having said that, let's look at the amygdala. When under stress, the amygdala takes over. It detects threats, real or perceived, and it triggers the body's stress response. So this is when your brain is no longer logically thinking and you're just in survival mode. You are literally, your defense mechanisms kick in and you are doing everything that you can to just survive and get out of the situation. And then last but not least, the third one we're going to look at is the hippocampus. And it is responsible for creating, arranging, and storing new memories, and also linking those memories to emotions and sensory experiences such as smells and sounds. So even just smelling something or hearing something can trigger an emotional experience that you've had in the past. And through research, we know that a lot of these memories can happen before we can, as silly as it sounds, but before we can remember them. So trauma can be ingrained from very, very early on without you even recognizing it. But so trauma can reduce the size of the hippocampus, it can make it smaller and interfere with the development of new cells and neural connections, which that means it can weaken its capacity to manage the memory and control fear responses. So when stress and trauma are long lasting and really intense, this highly affects the hippocampus. So those are the 3 main brain structures that trauma does influence. Now, having said a couple of those things already, we talked about with memory, that trauma affects the size of it, interferes with making new memories, and really makes fear responses kind of go wild. With neurotransmitters, trauma can create an imbalance in serotonin and dopamine, and both of those can be influential in mood disturbances like anxiety and depression. With sensory processing, trauma can create a heightened sensitivity to stimuli, which can be overwhelming and stressful. Fear response, we talked about that with the amygdala, that even if it's just a perceived threat, that part of your brain can go overactive, and then your anxiety and fear takes over. With connectivity, trauma can cause connectivity issues between different regions of the brain, and this can actually lead to negative self-perception and then ruminating thoughts. So your brain getting in that thought pattern of something negative, not being able to get out, and then this just ends up cyclical and not good. And then last but not least, it can affect brain plasticity. So trauma can cause the brain to become wired to expect and respond to threats, making it difficult to adapt to non-threatening situations. So like we talked about with perceived threats, something that may not be dangerous at all, because your brain is stuck in that routine of fight or flight, and not being able to adapt a non-threatening situation can absolutely make your brain go into overdrive. So let's look very briefly, and I mean briefly, at the nervous system overall. So you've got your main nervous system, you've got your central and your peripheral. Now from your peripheral, it is broken down into 2 others. We are going to be looking at the autonomic today, that is broken down into two main systems: the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about those. All right, so you've got, within the parasympathetic nervous system, you've got your ventral vagal, which is pretty much rest and digest. You see that at the very top of the screen. So yeah, that's where it promotes relaxation, recovery, and energy conservation. The body effects can be a slower heart rate. It can stimulate digestion, constricts your pupils, support immune function and healing. So typically when you're in that ventral vagal, you are feeling calm, safe, and able to restore energy. So then if we pop down, obviously you see this is looking like a stoplight. You pop down to the yellow, and that's the sympathetic nervous system. So this is when we talked about the amygdala popping you into fight or flight. This is when you enter that zone. And it really activates your body for a stress reaction. So this is when you are sensing danger or stress. You might feel anxious, restless, tense, overwhelmed, irritable. Within your body, you might have a faster heart rate, shallow breathing, or tight muscles. And then this state helps you to defend yourself or escape perceived threats. So that one's really when you are just doing what you can to really to maintain. And then last but not least, if we go down to dorsal vagal, this one's also considered, it's within the parasympathetic. And when I first read this, I was like, how in the world is that in the same category as ventral vagal? But I do get, it's pretty much your body going in self-preservation mode. So with dorsal, it's doing this parasympathetic response, but it's in a protective way. So it, in extreme threat, it triggers the freeze or the shutdown response for survival, like literally like an animal playing dead. So hence the quote unquote rest part for that. It happens when a situation feels overwhelming or inescapable and just entirely too much. You might feel numb, disconnected, fatigued, or hopeless, and body cues can oftentimes be low energy, slow breathing, or wanting to withdraw. So these are all things that are really just for self-preservation. So the polyvagal theory really, you don't choose your states. They're automatic. That's a really important part, is you're not thinking through what you're doing. These literally come automatically depending upon what the situation is. And we're going to talk about something, neuroception, in just a few minutes, but that's another thing that goes quickly, or goes really well with this. All right, so one other thing, we talked about those three different states: ventral vagal, sympathetic, dorsal vagal, and how differently they look, how the outer two are when your body is trying to rest and digest and really stay in that calm state, and sympathetic is the fight or flight. So there's just a couple of those adjectives for all three of those states. So I just mentioned neuroception. All right, so neuroception, think of it as your body's security camera. It's your nervous system's automatic ability to detect safety, danger, or life-threatening cues without conscious thinking. Just like going into dorsal vagal is without thinking. Your body does this automatically. So your body, some of the things it could possibly and constantly scan are people, environment, sounds, facial expressions, body language, tone of voice. And within milliseconds, without thinking, your body decides if you're safe, if you're going to stay in ventral vagal, if you're in danger, so you need to go into the sympathetic mode, that fight or flight, or if you're overwhelmed and absolutely shutting down at the end of your rope with dorsal vagal. A lot of times these are based, because obviously we're talking about trauma, these are based on past experiences. So if it's an experience you've been in before that ended traumatically, your neuroreceptors are going to pick that up. And if it's something that's been traumatic before, dorsal vagal might kick in without you often even thinking about it. Oftentimes neuroception can be inaccurate when your nervous system is dysregulated or has been hurt by stress or trauma in the past. So obviously it might not always do the correct thing. And then this one seems pretty given. Your neuroception can influence your emotions, your behaviors, and your ability to connect, because it really impacts how you react to every situation. So One of the things that teachers can do to help with neuroreception is to work with their students on co-regulation. So co-regulation is the process of one regulated nervous system, i.e. a teacher or a parent, helping another nervous system to feel safe, calm, and connected. So the student, so the mom helping her child, the parent helping the child, whoever it is, but really instilling those pretty much those self-regulation techniques. So a couple ideas for how you can do this. Use a soft tone of voice, soften facial expressions, because we know, like we just said, neuroreception is constantly scanning for all of these things to see if there's a perceived threat. Use open body language. Model deep breathing if you see that the child is really getting into that sympathetic state. Dim the lights, maybe, just to even calm the physical environment down. Change proximity. It may be that you need to get closer or further away from the student. It's really about knowing your students and what they need. Providing sensory activities, even if it's like a fidget spinner or one of the new Nido cubes. Providing something that allows them to, I guess, fixate differently on a physical object instead of that mental part. And then lower your body position. So really just making sure that you have an open body position and like a soft body position with your students. So those are all ways to help them co-regulate. Next, neuroplasticity. So what is it? Neuroplasticity is literally just the brain's ability to grow and change throughout one's life. So good news for us is if you've experienced a lot of trauma early on, there is still the possibility, very much so, that your brain can really change and learn a better way of being. So how? The brain can build new neural pathways through practice and repetition. As new pathways are built, old habits become less automatic. The brain can heal itself by creating alternate pathways. So literally think about a road being something that starts off a dirt road that's literally just dirt. And a car goes down at one time, a car goes down at two times, there's tire tracks. And as they keep going, there's literally a path built out. So the more and more we can help students to practice positive actions, those neural pathways will become more cemented within their brains. And the old ways, the ways that maybe didn't work of doing things, will become less trodden and will eventually kind of deteriorate since the newer neural pathways are in place. So how can we help students to do this? We need to create a safe, predictable environment. They need to know exactly what they're coming into every day. Use trauma-informed practices. Through this program, it's really helped me to see that I need to approach every student as if they have experienced trauma, because that's not going to do anybody harm. Using a trauma-informed lens is going to benefit every single student, whether they've had trauma or not. Teach and encourage self-regulation strategies, and these are obviously really helpful for us as teachers too, because we need to self-regulate. Focus on mindfulness with yourself and within the classroom. Do yoga, teach breathing exercises, do EFT tapping, all of those things that can literally take 30 seconds, but can totally help a child to get back to their happy. Build strong, meaningful relationships with your students. They need to be able to trust you. That is the number one thing, is that you've got to have a good relationship for these students to trust you. Practice restorative discipline versus punitive. So always go into it not with the what is wrong with you. And because we know that with trauma, it's you have trauma, you get in trouble for how you reacted to the trauma, which then creates more trauma. It's such a cycle. So go into it restoratively, and also use a growth mindset. Tell the kids that we are not going to be perfect, that things change and we will always be getting better. So moral of the story, however, though, is it starts with you as the teacher, as the parent, as the professional. When our nervous systems are grounded, predictable, and emotionally regulated, we create conditions where students' brains can form new pathways. So they are literally modeling what they see. However, on the flip side, a dysregulated nervous system of an adult can unintentionally say, hey, there's a threat. And so then students are going to have a harder time focusing, trying challenging tasks, or staying flexible. However, when we as adults show the students that we are practicing self-regulation, so the breathing, pausing, self-awareness, all of that, we model the skills that we want our students to build. So I absolutely love this. Our calm becomes their calm, and our capacity becomes their capacity. So we are literally showing them what we are capable of. I love those last two sentences. So a couple things to think about. Ask yourself, what puts you into the ventral vagal brain state? What is your calm, your happy, your zen? Think about those things. And then what coping mechanisms allow you to self-regulate? What are some of those things you do to get you back to that ventral vagal brain state? Some ideas could be yoga, journaling, breathing, walking, laughing, doing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sensory grounding activities, and literally naming your brain state or your feelings. So those are easy ways to get back to your ventral vagal, or even if not there, just to kind of get back to more imbalance. So I just want to end with, obviously, all of this. We know that the brain is extremely affected by trauma. However, the beauty of it is that the brain does have the ability to heal, as long as you have adults that understand that as well. I wanted to end with this one quote. I read this and I said, oh goodness. So the irony is that we attempt to disown our difficult stories to appear more whole or more acceptable. But our wholeness, even our wholeheartedness, actually depends on the integration of all of our experiences, including the falls. So going through trauma, there is zero, self-shame. It's actually that all of those experiences can be beautiful in the rebuild. So that the new you, those falls are extremely important within that. It's just figuring out how to get from that fall and getting back up. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.